known to do quite fantastical things as we get into this first game. Hoej on the paladin and Kuonet on the druid. Hoej, I feel, Hoej's playing the Hoej paladin, I like to call it. He pretty much made it popular in his DreamHack run, which he did extremely well. And Hoej has a habit of doing extremely well with paladin, especially at DreamHack.
Yes.
He has an incredible record with this class. And generally just in aggro decks overall, he did take a step away from the aggro style for a fair few months, and like actually just most of last year.
Yeah.
And it really didn't work out for him here. But when he swapped back, damn, he just won the European playoff.
Yeah, if you're not a long-term follower of the scene, I mean, first and foremost, you'd be forgiven for thinking Hoej is a new face to the circuit this year because he had a very, very long quiet period.
Yep.
But what Raven's referring to with the Paladin reference is that there was a DreamHack, I think DreamHack Winter 2015 maybe, where he finished the tournament with something like a 22-3 overall game record with Secret Paladin at the time, which was just insane.
Everyone.
He was just 3-0ing the entire Swiss with Secret Paladin. And this, is kind of the evolution, if you will, of Secret Paladin at this point. Is the aggressively curved mid-range Paladin deck with the full Murloc package. And he's found a nice matchup for it here. He has got the best of the Q order in this position, which he's going to need to get through these control decks with the right aggro decks lining up against them. But you can see already how heavily Kuonet has merged his decks to counter aggro with just a Doomsayer in his Jade Druid first and foremost. Not a tech choice we are used to seeing, but something that can come in very, very handy in these opening turns.
It's very, very handy when you draw it, especially, as and when you need it. There is a choice now between Kuonet where he can coin out Wild Growth just to start ramping up into potentially Shade Blossom, or he could just say no and just play Doomsayer and say, you know what? No, there is no snowballing Murloc effects that are going to happen now. There is no 2-drop or a combination of 2 1-drops that actually deal with this Doomsayer. So this is a guaranteed proc. And Kuonet's saying, right, I'm doing this, now I have initiative, and now I can play Wild Growth. Then, ramp up at my leisure, as opposed to being pressured by these Murlocs early on.
Dude, coin Doomsayer into Wild Growth is a hell of a curve.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Maybe Kuonet's just a genius.
Maybe.
Maybe he's my new favorite player. He already was, as I was actually doing my research into him. He says his 2 favorite decks of all time are Handlock and Patron Warrior. Would you like to guess what my 2 favorite decks of all time are, Raven?
Hunter and Priest.
No, it's Handlock and Patron Warrior.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
I thought so, funnily enough.
Well, you didn't, because I asked you, and you said something completely different.
It's a sarcastic answer, okay? So I thought that was obvious.
Oh, sorry, Raven. I know the day's been tough, but just bear with it. You need to be the bastion of positivity on this desk, or it all goes to hell.
I mean, that's pretty much why I'm hired. But yeah, Jade Spirit available for Kuonet. He can swipe, and it's definitely worth considering as Tidecaller is one of the minions that can really get you and get that early damage in. But is it too much of a committal?
No.
Kuonet thinks no, and we can see with the Blessing of Kings in hand.
I mean,
that worked out very well indeed for him. And it's definitely something he's got to consider. I
will give you the long list of reasons why that swipe feels like a good idea, sight unseen. There's Blessing of Kings, there's Gentle Megasaur, there's Murloc War Leader, there's even Rockpool Hunters coming down with tempo, whereas now they'd be forced to just buff this 1-1 and not have the charge on the buff, if you want to look at it that way. So it wasn't a high value swipe, but it was a swipe that denied potential value from the opponent. So I'm in full agreement with that play there from Kuonet. And now with the Innovate draw, this hand opens up in so many different directions. He can go just Jade Blossom Hero Power this turn and get naturally into his 6 drops, or he can just Innovate 1 out right now, which would give him a slightly awkward follow-up. He'd then be looking at like Jade Spirit Hero Power, and he'd be whiffing on the Jade Blossom. So I think he might just have to chill here, just hold on to the Innovate for the long term.
Just like it with Jade Spirit and Blossom.
You can do that too. I can see that. Curving, then they curve into a 6 afterwards.
Yeah, I think it seems reasonable.
The only slight concern I would have with that line is that you can potentially end up getting outvalued at that point if you don't get a good Auctioneer turn to go off.
Sure, I can see that.
Because that's the power of mid-range Paladin specifically, right? They can blow you out with a fast draw, but then they could also outvalue you in the late game, right? Vine Cleaver, Deathwing, there are cards in this Hoej list. So if you run out of cards in hand, you can actually very comfortably get outvalued. So holding on to the Innovate for a later Gadgetzan Auctioneer turn is definitely a real thing that Kuonet will be considering.
Yeah, and I played a lot of Hoej's Paladin, and Deathwing I love against Jade Druid.
Oh yeah.
Because sometimes, you can just get there with Murlocs, great, you win. sometimes they fend the aggression off long enough for it to get tricky. You know what's not tricky versus a deck that can't run a direct removal tool, or doesn't run a direct removal tool, should I say?
Is it a 12/12 that clears their entire board?
Yes. Good answer. You get 1 star.
Nailed it.
Good job. But yeah, and the problem is that damage as well. You are often almost there within like 1 to 2, you know, like 2 swings. Obviously, maximum is just 24 damage, but even 2 armor. But that at that point,
within 3 swings of deathwing, you kill your opponent.
Hey, druid gets a lot of armor.
It's true. Yeah.
But you know what I mean, right? You've normally pressured enough, and then deathwing is just too much of a threat on every single way you look at it.
Right.
For the druid to deal with. Also, Sunkeeper Tarim is really nice to have as well as the double-edged sword of dealing with big jades later on and just going aggro with the minions you've got already on board.
So is it Blessing and King's time? Kind of looks like Blessing and King's time.
Sure. Go on then. Go on then. You persuaded me. Very difficult. 6 attack into a 6 health minion. Seems good.
Maths checks out. Let's have a dabble. We'll see what we end up with. No war leader. A couple of fairly innocuous Murlocs, but still a big swing turn for hoej, but not quite as powerful as he would have been with that war leader coming down. And now that Innovate opens up even potential plays here for Kuonet with, you know, maybe Swipe and Aya in the same turn. So you can see one of the things that makes Innovate so powerful is that it's a card that has an insane win rate and an insane power level in your opening hand, but it honestly just doesn't tail off that hard. In aggro druid, it tails off hard as like a late game top deck, but in Jade druid, it's insane in your opening hand, and then late game, you can still use it to tempo out hard. You can still use it to have a huge resource generation turn with Gadgetzan Auctioneer. So Innovate is just a nutty card, right?
Yeah, it's just, and I think because of cards like Innovate, Gadgetzan outmatched, right? You know, like, it all just is pieces of a puzzle that come together. Once you start taking one of these things out, Innovate does lose its traction a little bit. You've just got to look at aggro druid and Innovate. Sometimes if you don't use it early, then you're not doing much later on with it at all. But in Jade druid, there's just always a way, you know, nourishes as well. You know, nourish with Innovate is absolutely huge. But now hoej has to do something a little bit huge himself to be able to just get back onto this board and pound the pressure. Because Kuonet's on 27. I was talking earlier, Paladin normally pressures them. You know, like, Paladin normally gets them to around 20-ish health, get a bit of early aggro on the go, and hoej just hasn't. And I feel like Curator is just the way to go here, because you put the threat of Deathwing, like, just constantly to Kuonet there. He knows Deathwing is the only dragon in the list, so he knows it's in hand. And you could say, well, you know, why do you want Deathwing with a full hand? You want the threat of Deathwing at this point in the game, I feel.
And honestly, I don't really think hoej has to do anything in terms of aggression to this point. He actually can just potentially outvalue Jade Druid.
Exactly. Like, Curator's just great.
Right. Like, obviously, you can never fully exhaust Jade Druid of value if they go that route, but if you're able to play a value game while actually being somewhat aggressive, which the Vine Cleaver has the card value while being aggressive written all over it. If you can do that kind of thing and just put pressure on Jade Druid at the same time, you can very often at least outvalue their hand, if not their entire deck. And that's just kind of what is being run into here for Kuonet. Just staring over a Paladin hand that's just chock full of value, and he's really running out of plays. He has one more turn's worth of play in hand, and then he's relying on top decks.
Yeah, and you start to look at the way these pieces go together in terms of the value game you were talking about earlier. So notice 2 swipes have been played, if my maths is correct. And then the Vine Cleaver plus the Tarim is such a brutal combo that Druid has no real way of stopping a lot of the time.
Well,
like, they kind of just have to deal with it.
There is a Gluttonous Ooze in Kuonet's Druid list. So when I said he'd be relying on top decks, if Vine Cleaver were to come down in the coming turns, he would very, very desperately need that, because you've painted the picture perfectly. Swipes are gone. Vine Cleaver will clear out these minions that are in play right now alongside extra things that are being dropped, and then the 1/1 dudes on the board will just be such a huge Sunkeeper Tarim threat after that.
Also as well, what a lot of those plays with Vine Cleaver do is, no matter how they're answered, because there's Drakes as well, right? You know, you can play a Drake on some 1/1s, great, and it's a 4/8. But what they do is they just make Tyrion better if Vine Cleaver is dealt with. If he oozes the Vine Cleaver, well, suddenly Ashbringer's pretty good.
Right.
And if you Drake pre-Tyrion, then Tyrion just hacks through that Drake on its own, you know, plus anything else you're going to play over those couple of turns. So Tyrion just gets progressively better the more Vine Cleaver is dealt with. So I definitely feel like this is just a win-win scenario for hoej at this point.
And honestly, from this point, I really think it's Kuonet that has to go for the aggressive stance and just start pushing damage in this position. It might open him up to the Sunkeeper Tarim coming down, but with just a Fandral pickup here, no Nourish, no Auctioneer been hit so far this game, and now the massive value engine of the Vine Cleaver to contend with. He can't really play a long-term trading game, right? He has to take away the resource of the Vine Cleaver by limiting the amount of health that hoej has to play with.
Yeah, and this is why I generally think this Paladin of hoej's is just one of the best Paladin lists I've played, if not the best, and one of the best lists in the game, in my opinion. Because this list is a list that can kill someone on turn 5 or 6, right? And then against Jade Druid, on going into turn 9, he pretty much has a full hand and a Vine Cleaver equipped. Yes, you know, he's not got the board, and he is behind taking a lot of damage, but look at the kind of value you have. Next turn, worst case scenario, even with a large hand, you can slam Deathwing and say, let's dance. Seriously though, look at the hand, right? Deathwing is... There's not many obstacles Kuonet can actually put up against Deathwing, never mind kill it. And he's within that 2-swing health bar, so... maybe.
For this turn, at least, though, we're probably looking at a Wickerflame turn. Wickerflame and Spike Ridge T can come down here and just contest the board, and it would also allow a swing of Vine Cleaver to go through, and then 2 1/1s would be protected behind that huge Divine Shielded double taunt minion. Which then, as you mentioned before, with both swipes gone, then that's giving you your Sunkeeper Tarim platform for the next turn. You should be able to trade through the minions that way, and then you're just about looking at stabilizing with your last few points of damage.
Yeah, and again, with double swipe gone, it means that, you know, hoej can really mess around with his life total here, because you know there's not double swipe coming at your face, which is, you know, just very important to be aware of, because it's one of the few options Druid has. Okay.
Wow, this is really interesting to me, actually.
It does present just a strong board, and it can't be matched at the moment by Kuonet.
It's fair.
The Ratho with Fandral is a pretty reasonable draw. And it lines up against the Tarim because it hits the 4. It's actually pretty sweet. Okay.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Now we're talking.
hoej could have actually chosen to answer the Fandral instead by, you know, Tariming first and then swinging into it. He would have wasted a ton of value, though, because firstly, like, popping the Aya felt great to then reduce the bigger Jade Golem down, and then obviously by playing the Tarim first and then swinging afterwards, you're missing out on those 1/1 recruits to go down. So I think all things considered, hoej knowing that there's only 1 or 2 cards that are going to get punished with Fandral in this position, but Wrath into Nourish is about as bad as the punish gets.
I agree, but also how bad is it for hoej? It's not even that bad. It's worst case scenario, but you look at hoej's hand, you look at what he's got on board.
Sure. Yeah.
He's got the weapon equipped, he's got 2 3/3s versus 1.
Yeah.
It's just not even that bad, and this was worst case scenario.
Yeah.
It's crazy. He still has Spike Ridge. You could just create like just a 5 million. It's nuts. It's actually nuts.
You could also just play the Murloc turn this turn. And
I like it,
then
actually.
set up for Megasaur on the follow-up.
Why not? What, as in the Murlocs and the Megasaur? Do you want the Megasaur this turn?
You could go like 1 Stonehill, Hydrologist, War Leader, Hero Power, and then just leave that board and then try and Megasaur with tempo on the following turn.
I think I kind of like the Megasaur this turn. It's just 5 attack.
It's fair.
You know, it's like, it's just a big dude. I'll do that.
Out of my jungle.
Nothing too crazy, but Craze Worshipper.
No. No. Just no.
It's actually, I would say just an okay 5-drop card, right? The health pool really helps it out.
It's a Fen Creeper. We take those.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's nothing to write home about. I'm not going to let anyone know, other than you guys listening. But yeah, just does a decent job. Pretty much me as a caster.
Decent? You'd go that high?
Oh, come on.
This is the play I like, though. This is the play I suggested straight away. It's kind of maximum tempo over the course of 2 turns. Your play would have maybe front-loaded a bit harder. Yeah. Just had the 5/4 in play right now, but the amount of potential extra damage you get off the Gentle Megasaur Battle Cry next turn in most occasions makes up for not having that 5/4 in play.
Yeah,
already.
I think I would. I mean, I say I'd half worry about the Drake coming down, but a lot of the minions are 3 health anyway. You'd effectively lose 1 Murloc's worth of swing.
Yeah.
But you would then presume to lose the Murlocs and the rest of the minions in trading into the Drake.
Right.
Whereas the Mega Sword does so much damage to that on its own, it would feel kind of good. But second War Leader, I mean, I told you Druid just gains a lot of armor. I mean, you know, Kuonet's back onto a very large health total. Just doesn't really matter though. Ooh, Wind Fury.
Unlucky.
I mean, Divine Shield.
I guess we'll just have to take Divine Shield and stick this giant board of Murlocs forever.
And the fact that that Hydrologist just trades so cleanly with the Gadget Zone. Boop. Yeah. Boop. A little bit of a Sombra on the Gadget Zone if he really wants to. Do you know who Sombra is?
I do.
Oh, okay, good job.
She's an Overwatch.
Ah,
She's
nice.
a rip-off of a Street Fighter 5 character.
Wow. I do not condone anything Saul says whilst on this cast. I am just here.
Honestly, neither do I.
Wow, okay. Well, I've been teaching Saul lore of Hearthstone, Warcraft and such. Mainly because of the trailer early on.
Yeah, I did have to get like a refresher course in Death Knights and the Lich King.
It's so sick. Oh my god. I cannot explain how exciting this is for this trailer and this new expansion. And also how exciting it is to see hoej seemingly do well in this first game.
Yeah, the key point here, when I said, all right, Divine Shield, I guess we just have to take that and stick this board forever. The key point is there's no Yogg in Kuonet's deck. So
yes, that's actually...
This board is actually just sticking forever.
Based on the Yoggs we've seen today, it is pretty important that it is in fact not in this deck.
It does seem like Yogg is still a fairly good card. This frustrates me.
I'm just getting back to good old Yogg Hunter.
This frustrates me, Raven.
It's the grand plan.
I don't want to live in a world where Yogg is a good card.
It's an exciting card. You can't argue with that.
We did actually get pretty hype about it.
He says all this, but backstage you don't see Saul going like, ah, as Yogg's played.
It was pretty nice.
This just isn't going to be enough though, and hoej takes the first game, and this is one of the reasons why we spoke a lot about, oh, you know, this player or this person thinks this is the strongest deck in this meta. There's so many viable options currently that people have wildly different opinions, but this paladin from hoej gets the job done time and time and time and time again. And I think it's actually his list that is the strongest deck in the game at the moment.
All right. If you love hoej so much, why don't you marry him? Honestly.
I wish.
I
He
mean,
also has a brother, so.
he does. He actually played his brother in a DreamHack Swiss in 2015. I believe the same one where hoej was going in hard with that secret paladin.
Yeah, and we said earlier, yeah, you know, some of the newer viewers to the Hearthstone esports scene might not recognize hoej, but we've known him from a very long time ago. But just in case you don't, you can check this out.
Even though I've played like so many Hearthstone matches, I always get a little nervous when there's a lot of people watching. Pidgey is my bird. Sometimes like I read in chat that bird is more famous than me on stream. It's like whenever I'm playing video games, she's like jumping around, flying around on my shoulder, and she's not shy. She's like very adventurous. I've tried to teach her some word, but it's difficult. Try to teach her smog. You know, smog from going face. She can only say a little of it. It's difficult. I'm kind of shy. Normally don't like all the spotlights. While my bird is more like not scared of anything and like wants to see what's going on. I don't know if it's helping that much, but sometimes people like making fun when I'm playing on stream and Pidgey's jumping around. It's like 2 versus 1. Do you think like Pidgey's my lucky charm? I like to think so, but probably not. If I win this tournament, I'm probably gonna get more in the spotlight. I'm not sure if I'm gonna like it, but Pidgey is definitely gonna like it.
hoej does come across quite, quiet, quietly spoken, maybe a little bit shy. But once you just, spend a bit of time with him, get to know him, he's actually, pretty fun to be around, to be completely honest. He's definitely a lot of fun, especially when he's with his brother. That's kind of great. But I don't know. I've had a lot of good times with hoej.
I feel like to use a massive cliche, if you just looked up the definition of the word chill in a dictionary, you just find hoej, right? And as you can see, some of the sights and sounds of the event here in Shanghai, Eloise, of course, signing for many of her adoring fans, of course, on home turf. And at least, it's nice to see at least one member of the Chinese Hearthstone community doing good things while on home soil.
Wow. Someone's winning games in this room. And,
Again, I do not condone anything I say while on this stream.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, we have got Eloise, we have this guy's Toast knocking around as well. So if you're actually at the event and can hear us somehow, because we're not currently speaking Chinese, so they don't actually hear us directly, but you can actually check out Toast. He's going to be doing some cool things as well, but we're doing cool things in this series as hoej is locking in the Pirate Warrior for this next game against Kuonet. And Kuonet going for the Jade Druid, a matchup he's probably feeling a little bit more comfortable in than the previous one.
Yeah, so I heard TJ and Admirable talking about this in the previous series, and Admirable said, like, perhaps to some people's surprise, Jade Druid is probably about 50-50 in this matchup. If that was a surprise to you, I'm going to knock your socks off, because I think Jade Druid is a slight favorite in this matchup.
I've played around this. I'm not wearing socks.
Oh, well, damn. Oh, he's actually not. Jeez. Oh, I can see your feet. Put them away.
I have shoes on. Hang on a minute. Don't just misplay this to the audience.
I mean, we'll get back to Hearthstone in a second, but I just quickly need to address the fact that Raven is wearing open-top shoes and no socks right now.
It's really warm in China, okay?
It's genuinely disgusting, and I want to leave right now.
Wow, don't make me throw a mushroom at you, Sol.
Pirate Warrior, when I say that, I'm talking about kind of an outdated list, or maybe what we would still perhaps refer to as the standard list. Over the last week or two, we've seen more and more Bittertide Hydras coming into Pirate Warrior, and that is an addition that can tilt the Jade Druid matchup back in your favor. Because how does Jade Druid interact with a 5-mana 8?
Unless it's already very far ahead, it doesn't.
Right.
I also think the double Spellbreaker from hoej really helps out a lot as well. Just saying, you know, one, yes, I'm probably not going to need 2 in any given game, but having 2 means I'm probably going to draw 1 in any given game, which is the more important factor.
It means I have a very high chance of connecting my Arcanite Reaper through your Primordial Drake.
Exactly,
That's basically
yeah,
what it's
exactly.
saying.
We're kicking off here. hoej's going for a straightforward Nazos first mate and does have the option to work into Saltage Captain next turn.
As a greater point, though, I do find it interesting that hoej in particular is running such an aggressive lineup. I think this actually maybe all ties together, but classically, we saw hoej as a Reno lock player for a very, very long time. He was playing kind of mid-range decks and control decks. But when I said earlier that if you were kind of new to the scene, you might not recognize this guy because he has had a very, very dry period for quite a long time. That was during the time when he was bringing these Reno decks to every tournament. Now, he seems to have been switching to a more aggressive strategy over the last couple of months and a more mid-range or aggressive mid-range strategy in the Ungoro meta, and it's been working out really, really well for him. He is on an insane hot streak right now, and it seems maybe that switch of deck loyalty, of archetype loyalty, is paying big dividends for him.
Well, originally he was actually an aggressive player.
I mean, we go back to the Secret Paladin.
Yeah,
thing,
exactly.
Right?
Right at the beginning. And something that really stuck out to me as I first started casting hoej was that his decision-making on when to actually go face and then when to make trades and how to utilize the cards he has in hand to make these just, you know, like, you win by just having enough damage, right? You know, not over the top, not under, just enough. And the whole point of using those resources to just about get you there. hoej is very, very good at this, and we'll probably see this come out in the next few games with this aggro lineup, but that really impressed me overall. So far, he's off to a pretty reasonable start, even though the Saltage Captain is cleaned up by Wrath.
Yeah, but honestly, this is kind of the thing with the Jade Druid matchup, is that the Kuonet is just kind of chilling right now. Like, he's not really in any great danger. He's gone Wrath and cleared up the majority of this board. He's ramped up, he's got ahead on the mana curve, and he still has a Swipe and a Gluttonous Ooze in reserve in hand to be able to deal with some of these threats that come out from hoej. So hoej is going to need to push consistently, maybe 2 or 3 board reloads from this point to get over the line, or he can just switch to straight damage at some point and just try and put Kuonet on having those mass healing cards, those mass armor gain cards, the Earthen Scales and the Feral Rage.
Yeah, this is a very tricky hand for hoej to navigate. So we might actually see exactly what I was talking about here. You know, how he navigates it often is what wins him games as these aggro decks. If he went for the Corsair and the buff on the weapon, to us, it looks like it could be pretty reasonable because it might bait the ooze, and if it doesn't, it's just more value. If there's just a swipe, then it means the Berserker's more safe. It means the Kor'kron's more safe after seeing a Wrath. But is hoej going to identify that and go for it, or is he just going to play out something a little bit more aggressive? And he has gone for the Kor'kron. With the Fiery War Axe in hand, it's likely that he wants to combine Fiery War Axe with the Cultist to then make that more of a bigger weapon.
I mean, I liked all of that explanation, but honestly, from hoej's position, I feel like he spent 70 seconds that turn trying to talk himself out of just playing Kor'kron Elite on turn 4, and then just couldn't find a good enough reason not to do it.
Don't get me wrong, after all that, as Pirate Warrior, it's difficult to play off curve.
Right.
It's very difficult to want to play off curve because your deck is so powerful when it is just played out. You know, that's the strength of the deck. And also, you know, he does have Fiery War Axe and a Heroic Strike in hand. I mean, that's just damage right there. You know, you do have to actually think about over, 2 to 3 turns, what's my max damage output? And does that just get me there? And now with Spellbreaker, that alters the maths.
And I think the punish that happened from Kuonet was so just mathematically unlikely. There needed to be an innovate play to make this kind of thing happen. If hoej was looking at the board state and go, okay, I go Kor'kron, he goes swipe, and then it's probably swipe hero power, right? Or it may be swipe wild growth, but then I get to develop frothing on board uncontested. He's just used the swipe. That seems to play just fine for me. Innovate was a card I was talking about in the last game as well, and just talking about how it just very rarely tails off in power in Jade Druid. You saw then, it was a 6-mana turn. Still, the Innovate was just incredibly powerful still to be able to swing back the board state.
This is a bit of a tough turn, Kuonet, because one, you never want to leave a frothing up. If you're going to leave it up, you want to put a taunt in the way. If you put a taunt in the way, then you can't kill the weapon. And if the weapon swings this turn, then the ooze does nothing until another weapon's equipped. So to me, it all feels a little bit tricky. I mean, Kuonet played that very fast, so he just made his decision. But to me, it felt like there was reasonable consideration for both those plays. It was hard, I think.
You had time to articulate all of those options out loud before he did anything, which means he certainly had time to think about them all.
It was a tough one, I feel, though.
I definitely agree.
Because the taunt leads to the weapon use, which is very like, ooh, like, what if he just doesn't have another weapon now? Like,
so, I don't know if tough is quite the right word. Like, I think it ends up being this play quite easily by a large margin.
If you just cold hard maths it.
But it was just a very awkward turn, right? Like,
doesn't feel good.
Yeah, you couldn't do all the things that you wanted to do. Maybe if that wild growth had been able to come down earlier and you had a bit more mana advantage, or if you hoej hadn't forced the Innovate out of hand on the previous turn, this could have been a bigger swing. But let's not be that greedy, right? We had our big swing turn with the Innovate. It's just kind of fitting that Kuonet had to just hold that L for a second, take an awkward position.
So this is scary now. hoej can just Spellbreaker and go if he really, really wants. And then what this does is it holds the War Axe for next turn, so he can always get one swing in. He's gone in between here to develop the board instead. But what I think he's done this because if exactly Primordial Drake comes down after that Spellbreaker, you're a little bit upset about life.
Yeah, and look at the board he's left against a Primordial Drake as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're feeling pretty good.
That is getting windmill slammed if it's in hand, and then that means you can respond by going Spellbreaker, Fiery War Axe, and just pushing more damage, just trying to straight up activate the race from that position.
Wow. Oof. Wow. What other 3 cards do you want from Nourish at this point? Because I feel like these 3, maybe one Scales instead of double Feral, but close. But this was very close to the optimal draw from Nourish.
I would have taken Innovate Swipe number 2 as well. That would have done just fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
You just want the world, don't you, so? Now we can just clean trade here, take away the Cultist as well.
Nope.
Oh, he's gone for armor.
Armor gain, son.
Yeah, this actually just works better over time, right?
The theory here is that this thing connects for 3 one time, and then he puts Primordial Drake in the way, and he doesn't really have to worry about removing it. But with the Spellbreaker there, that can end up being a huge punish for the choice not being able to remove it, because the Spellbreaker will allow it to push through for a second time, and then it is forcing repetitive damage through that Primordial Drake.
And now the minions just don't die to Drake?
And look how awkward the turn is.
Yeah, again.
Exactly the same spot you were talking about before.
Hey, he's going to go for the weapon removal this time.
Right.
And I guess the armor up again? Yeah. And this is just awkward. Now does he just have to Earthen Scales the use? I don't know. Probably not.
I think you hero power. I think unless you specifically
the value trade, right?
Right.
Leads to Primordial Drake anyway.
Yeah, I think Primordial Drake and Earthen Scales can be used. The counter argument to that is that you probably want to Wild Growth and Primordial Drake next turn. If you draw Wrath, you'll probably want to do those 2 things together as well. So there is definitely 2 sides to that coin in that position. But now hoej is kind of having his patience tested here, right? Like, how long can I dare to hold on to this Spellbreaker without needing that extra power on board, just having a 4-3 beat stick just to do repetitive damage?
And this draw like pushes him towards playing them both as well, because this could be let's have a look. This could be a Leroy draw, a green skin, a bit of Tide Hydra. Well, Arcanite Reaper.
Right.
All of these mean you cannot play the Spellbreaker. Decision made.
Yes.
But this is exactly 2 4-drops with 8 mana, and his hero power is armor up. Like it's not like, well, at least I got a hero power out of it. It's like, no, these are not the days of Finley anymore. We are not in the Wild Tournament the other weekend. This is just going to be armor up from hoej if he only plays 1, and I think this is why he's sitting deliberating. This is a very, very tough call, and I think he's going to go, okay, he's just going to go for it. He's saying, well, you know what? It doesn't die to Drake anyway, right? So the silence will, in effect, push through damage anyway by having the minion on board. Here comes Big Daddy Drake.
Yeah, once you kind of factor in a couple of turns, having the Spellbreaker on board is almost the same thing, because, even after the trade happens, you still gained a 4-1 on board. In this position, it does end up being the Spellbreaker, which crystallizes the point, but whichever 4-1 remained, that 4-1 was there because you played the Spellbreaker, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So then that gives you the ability to trade through the Primordial Drake anyway with more of your draws. Obviously, you would still prefer to be silencing it and pushing damage this turn, but in every non-Primordial Drake world, it would be better to have the Spellbreaker on board.
Also as well, this is looking a little bit grim now for hoej, as Kuonet's on the verge of stabilizing here on the back of this Gadget Zan combined with the Drake. But what I will say is there are still a lot of cards. I named double Arcanite Reaper, the Hydra, so on and so on. But at this point, it's just pushed past the edge, and it's just not going to be good enough, I feel. There's nothing that quite gets through it. And one more turn of holding on to that Spellbreaker. And I think the awkwardness of the turn before that Kuonet did with the weapon removal gave hoej a nod of no Drake. Because Drake is so often dropped as, I need to drop Drake because it's a big taunt against Pirate Warrior.
Sure.
Maybe just said, well, you know what, okay, the Spellbreaker is actually worth dropping now, and it was just a turn different, and Kuonet is going to even this up versus hoej at a 1-1 record now, getting the win with the Jade Druid against the Pirate Warrior.
And you can see him visibly steadying himself there, right? There was a couple of very sharp intakes of breath, continuing to do so now, just regulating that breathing pattern as much as he can, and that's very wise actions for a man that doesn't have the level of experience that his opponent does. But most of the competitors on this stage today and over the coming days have. He's really trying to throw a spanner in the works, cause some upsets here, and he's going to need to keep a cool head.
Yeah, and Kuonet's new to this, basically, as you were saying, but he may not have too many fans quite yet, but he has got his very biggest fans, which are his parents.
I got my master's degree, and I decided to take like 2 years in the Hearthstone and try to find out how far I can go.
Kuonet has the exact cards, and VCT can't believe it. Kuonet is going to find himself going to Shanghai.
I start to believe I can do it, so I told my parents I'll try my best and see how far I can go. Now they watch all of my matches. My mother still not understand, but she likes to watch because she likes to hear like, this is a huge, something like that.
That's a huge draw, actually. Kuonet draws the perfect card with Ravaging Ghoul.
And my father once has a chance to become a pro bridge player, but because he need to find a job, so he never has a chance to do that. So he thinks if you have a dream, you have to do your best to fulfill it. So my parents say, this dream we cannot do now, but maybe you can help us to like fulfill, to make our dream.
Kuonet's parents are just the best. I mean, it's always crazy to have like support like that from parents when though they don't really understand what's going on. You know what I mean? They probably don't fully get esports. They don't really get the gaming world due to a potential generation gap. But in general, just having that kind of support is actually kind of awesome.
The more I hear about this guy, the more he resonates with me. I talked about how we shared the same 2 favorite decks, and right away at the start of that piece, that idea of I'm going to give myself 2 years and see what happens with it, I was in that exact same spot about 2 years ago. And for him, it was the support of his parents that really allowed him to commit to it. For me, it was my wife. We're both here. Seems to have worked out pretty well.
I thought you were going to say the support of me.
No.
No,
okay,
never. What pushed you over? But okay, never mind.
You know, we both ended up here through different routes, so it seems to be working out fine. But hey, the more I hear about this guy, the more I'm rooting for him. So let's go, Kuonet. Let's do this.
Yeah, and he is 1-1 versus hoej. The experience difference is huge. hoej's been around for a fair few years now. We've got to see who's going to make it out on top of this one, as Europe and America's regions are actually pretty even in results so far. I think America's a little bit forward because Ant won the earlier series.
But then Muzzy lost after that. So,
oh, that's true. Yeah, of course. So I think it's pretty even.
Last time I actually had the hard numbers in front of me, it was 3-1, 3-1. Between Europe and America both had a 3-1 record. So yeah, it is. They were leading the way between them and you know, counteracting the 0-4 record of the Chinese players to start with. But yeah, this is of course the classic showdown, the tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme.
Wow.
Which is which? Call it.
I mean, I think hoej is beautiful.
hoej is a beautiful man.
Yeah.
I agree. And Kuonet has 10,000 games of Patron Warrior
so
under
he
his
is a
belt,
beast.
which makes him a beast.
Yeah. In this matchup, though, is just another ooze causing issues for hoej. hoej has to kind of pull something together here out of a hand that looks fantastic if he had a weapon.
Yes.
It would be kind of glorious if he had a weapon, but upgrade doesn't feel like it's going to cut it. Even frothing doesn't really make enough of an impact on the board because the trades actually benefit Kuonet.
Yeah, and it just echoes how huge this Gluttonous Ooze is. We've seen tech choices.
You're just trying to get brownie points with his parents because you just said huge.
Yes.
Okay. This is a huge game. Stuff like that. Is that what we're going to go for?
I was annoyed that you didn't pick up on the rhyme scheme more than anything, but we've seen it come into play in both back-to-back series, and I've seen multiple top players, and I know Admirable talks about this as well, really talking about how this is a very tech card meta. It's about like bringing the right tech cards to the right tournament. You know, did you have your Hungry Crabs in the right meta game? Did you have your Harrison Jones and your Gluttonous Ooze in the right meta game? And it seems very, very much so that Kuonet is hitting these oozes at the right time.
Yeah, 100%. Archaeologist and Mana Worm being able to come down now, whilst your opponent is behind. It's like,
You just got the board on
who's
turn
the Pirate
4.
Warrior?
Just got the aggro minions in play on turn 4 against a Pirate Warrior. Living the dream.
And now, after the upgrade, then the Fiery War Axe gets drawn. I mean, just a kick in the teeth at this point for hoej. This is the exact opposite of what you want to see. Because the plan here was clearly deckhand into Cultist.
Yes.
Just to upgrade the weapon and keep it going. But now do plans just change? Because suddenly, that Cultist buff on the Fiery War Axe post-ooze seems very, very powerful indeed.
Not to mention, this is just a board you really want to be swinging a Fiery War Axe at right
I mean,
now.
that's also a reasonable point, I guess.
Yeah.
And you could just get down Corsair as well, which stops the stops whatever minion you leave up working as well against the following turn.
Sure.
Although you might actually just wait and just do the big turn the turn after.
He's going to go deckhand, patches, double trade, and push through. Use the weapon instead, maintain patches. I mean, I guess this is fine. Sure. I can see this working out. He could have achieved essentially the same thing using the coin instead and getting the Fiery War Axe on the go, but this, you know, preserves a lot more of his resources, gets value out of the upgrade that he has just used, doesn't really want to be immediately overwriting it. And we can see Kuonet has no answer immediately in hand for that Frothing Berserker, but the Frostbolt is an amazing pickup, especially when the initial pull here was the Volcanic Potion as well. So between Volcanic Potion and Ping in the next turn, he should be able to clear any reasonable size board.
And also that turn set up for this turn, which is minus the Heroic Strike, he can play all of his cards. So you can get the upgrade, right?
So if he goes, Fiery War Axe, 1 mana, coin, blood cell, cultist.
So this just sets up for that power turn I was talking about, of just saying, well, now I can add 2 big pirates to the board, and swing an upgraded Fire War Axe. Like, that is actually just huge. And at the point of losing the board that early, and these are the kind of turns you have to set up for to get it back, or to just do enough damage to face to win the game that way. And with Heroic Strike, I mean, this is all just saying one thing to me. You've got to presume Kuonet is going to use his hero power next turn. More than likely, right?
Yes.
So, you know, just actually going just hyper-aggressive feels really good, I feel.
It's a good time to get 3-3s and 3-4s on the board as well, because one thing that Kuonet can't really do this turn is secret into Medivh's Valet, like that kind of tempo removal play, because as you mentioned, he's fully earmarked for dealing with that Frothing Berserker. So yeah, there's the Medivh's Valet.
That's the play.
You know, a barrier into Valet this turn would be a great looking play if there wasn't just a 9-1 staring back at him on the other side of the board.
Yeah, I was...
Potion ping, right?
Yeah. I was actually trying to work out whether he could do that anyway and sacrifice the extra damage to set up for a potion next turn, but...
You're a brave man.
No, that's what I mean. I was just trying to think about whether you could just get that barrier down early and get more value from it, but it was just never going to be Volcanic Potion in that instance. A dead draw for hoej, though.
Yeah.
That N'Zoth's Burst Mate is just the worst card in the deck at that point.
Speaking of worst card in the deck, Eater of Secrets is drawn from Kuonet. Very, again, tech cards. I gave him credit where credit was due for hitting the right tech cards. Eater of Secrets, I'm not quite so sure about in this metagame. Most of the people who are bringing Mage have chosen not to include Eater of Secrets in there. Kuonet is very much the outlier on that front. But this is just a clean Firelands Portal turn by anyone's estimate.
Only 4-4 though. That does just get cleaned up by the weapon if hoej so chooses. Dead cards not bad. You can get a 1-1 and a 3-3 onto the board after this.
Yep.
But look at the health.
I know.
It's just not getting him there. That's the problem. He's at 25. There's still Ice Barrier, double Ice Block. And most importantly, I think there's Secret plus Medivh's Valet, which just deals with almost all the minions from Pirate Warrior that they're going to play out.
Yeah, hoej needs to hit some beef. And this is honestly, this is about as big as Tiny Warrior gets. It's playing Captain Greenskin, it's playing a Bitter Tide Hydra, it's not playing Mortal Strikes. It's just got minions in play.
Should it be playing Can? Because it needs to hit some beef.
All right, okay. After fully processing the role-playing implications of that joke, I did get there in the end.
There was just a stutter where sort of like, what stupid thing has Raven said now?
Bear in mind, like 2 days ago, we were watching the Ungoro trailer, and I asked you, in full earnest, is that tiny cow thing a Tauren?
Yeah, well, that's why I thought you'd know.
Okay, all right.
You are on.
And I was like, yes, moo. It's actually an emote in WoW. /moo is a Tauren, and they do a full moo. It's great.
No, I've never really had any motivation to play World of Warcraft before until now.
Well, there you go. You can be a giant humanoid cow and moo at people. What more do you need in life? There's a new idea for just a fresh new MMO, World of Warcraft 2. World of Warcraft moo! Oh my god. Just free ideas, guys. Won't even charge you.
Meanwhile, in Hearthstone, the game we are actually playing, Kuonet has taken over this game completely.
Yeah.
There's one ice block up, there is still an ice barrier to be able to be punched through, there is a second Medivh's Valet for tempo, there is everything Kuonet could possibly want, and an Eater of Secrets.
Yeah. Looking too great, to be honest. I think in these games, hoej's really been missing the Power 5 drops, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier,
Yeah.
right.
Like, no Arcanite Reapers, no Hydra. We saw Greenskin, but on the last turn of the game.
And
you know.
honestly, it's unfortunate for him because it was kind of the same story in the previous game as well. Greenskin came along right at the end when he conceded,
Exactly, yeah.
but it was one turn too late. And this is what I was saying. He's built his deck to do that kind of thing. Before you threw in your terrible Ken joke, this is what we were talking about, believe it or not, is that he has tried to pack the deck full of as much beef as Pirate Warrior can carry. He's got the Bitter Tide Hydra in there. He's got the Captain Greenskin. So he's within his rights to be drawing a lot better than this, and he just isn't hitting those threats.
Yeah, and again, it's also the draws on the turns he needs even them to be decent and not there. That N'Zoth's first mate was literally the worst card in the deck to draw after the upgraded War Axe turn. It was very, very rough. But Kuonet, as you said, you know, he's becoming more and more your favorite player of this tournament, and he's up 2-1. And we've talked a lot about, you know, hoej's had a dry spell. He came out, you know, guns blazing in his early career. He's had a bit of a dry spell, now he's doing fantastic again. But Kuonet's just making a great first impression to me. Actually, you know, he's like he's just making such a great performance of it. Even just getting to championships as, you know, a lesser known, lesser experienced player. When he's standing next to players like Kalento, for example, is absolutely huge and very, very impressive. And he's continuing to just impress me as we see his play. And speaking of K-God, there he is, just the casual chill, looking very relaxed. He's going to be coming up next versus Mage, another of Sottle's favorite players at this tournament. And there's Mage. Quick wave to the camera. Radu just
no, he's not waving to the camera. He's waving to me. Right?
Ah, of course.
Right.
But yeah, that's going to be the matchup coming up next, and that's going to be a great one. I'm looking forward to actually just sitting back and watching that match.
I actually don't remember when I was last this excited to watch a matchup of Hearthstone. Kalento, one of the few players that just hasn't missed a beat despite taking a lot of time out to stream basically full time, and Mage, one of the very, very best new up-and-comers in the 2017 season. So I cannot wait to see that one happen. But before we get into that, we have to wrap up a very important series right in front of us, and it's Kuonet looking to throw down yet another upset, taking down one of Europe's finest in hoej. One game away now, just this control paladin to pick up a win. Dirty Rat, Consecration, Rallying Blade, all picked up early against Pirate Warrior, but he's going to throw back the Dirty Rat. I expected to see the Consecration go back. I wondered maybe if the Dirty Rat would be held onto, but again, I think it's a nod to just how big hoej's Pirate Warrior is, right? You just don't want to keep that Dirty Rat.
100%, and also just the way Kuonet's Paladin is as well, is that double Doomsayer, double Dirty Rat, a Forbidden Healing, double Equality Wild Pyro combo, the Gluttonous Ooze of Doom, basically, like hoej's worst enemy at this point, as well as late game. This is a very interesting list. Like, Elise is in this Paladin list, along with one Spite Raged, 2 Stampeding Kodos, and then, like, you know, Rag, Tyrion, one Drake, and the Leon Hands we saw in the opening mulligan as well. So this deck is built to never die. But isn't the N'Zoth shell we're actually used to seeing if you go control Paladin? It's actually just saying I've got a lot of healing and just a lot of strong cards, and kind of instead of N'Zoth, you see like Elise as the kind, what for me at least is like the replacement card.
And I think, looking at the stats, I mean, off the top of my head, I think Control Paladin versus Pirate Warrior, the opening hand Doomsayer is a huge swing. I think it's very close to a double digits increase in win percentage, having Doomsayer in the opening
Bear
hand.
in mind, 5% is a big number when we're talking percentages.
I believe, like, just from memory, I believe it's like 8 or 9% increase. Like, it's crazy.
Look at the turn this has stopped as well. This could have been a Bloodsail Raider Corsair turn.
It'd have been a 5-3, a 3-3, and a 1-1 on the board this turn.
It's a pretty good turn. What's beneficial is the follow-up we can see, unless Kuonet goes for the Tempo Aldor. But the problem is the Tempo Aldor against how big hoej's Pirate Warrior is feels a little bit risky to me.
Easy,
Big
big,
warrior,
easy
easy.
pirate, easy warrior.
Oh, you throw the Pirate in there, why not?
Well, yeah, it's just tiny warrior, isn't it? That's what we come down
Tiny.
to. Yeah, this is tiny
It
warrior.
has a Bitter Tide Hydra and Frothing Berserkers. It's not that tiny, Sol.
In the new scheme of Hearthstone archetype naming, this is tiny warrior versus medium paladin.
No, this is not Medium Paladin.
It is medium paladin.
Why?
Because N'Zoth paladin is big.
No. No. Just no. Okay, so Patch's draw is definitely not good here. That could have been any other card in the deck. And
we
we
just
talked a
didn't
lot.
draw a card this turn.
Yeah, exactly. And we've talked a lot about, you know, hoej trying to get a win with this Pirate Warrior, and he actually felt he was favored in his group with his lineup.
Thirsty.
So in case you didn't hear that, hoej was saying he's favored in his group with his lineup.
Not gonna lie, we didn't hear a word of that. I hope
No.
you guys did.
Yeah, so, you know, I do feel like, you know, we came into this, you know, we were looking at the decks, just doing some homework, and we were like, yeah, I think this is just going to be rough. We said it right at the start of the series.
Right.
Hoej can just get locked out if these decks from Kuonet do what they're built to do. Basically, you don't put Forbidden Healing and you know, oozes in every deck to try and win the control matchups, right? You know, you put them to beat down aggro, and so far so good for Kuonet here.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see Hoej's perspective, because like let's just look at Kuonet's lineup specifically, not like the group as a whole. The two big problematic decks were looking to be the Taunt Warrior and the Control Paladin. Well, one of those you can back, which Hoej did. He got rid of the Taunt Warrior, which was the big blowout deck against his lineup. And then some people just don't really have a lot of faith in Control Paladin as a particularly resilient deck. Maybe Hoej is one of those people. Feels like a good, efficient aggro deck can push through this in a lot of situations. And you'd say that he has a point, because look at how awkward Kuonet's turn had to be there. Just preemptively consecrating a Frothing Berserker so that he can deal with it now on a follow-up turn.
That's actually nutty and a bit risky as well. But yeah, and also double Spellbreaker versus Paladin.
Yep.
Spite Ridge, not a problem. Spite Ridge normally solos Pirate Warrior.
Right.
But then even Tyrion as well. You know, like you can deal with the really big problem cards that Paladin normally puts up against you. But Hoej now with this sort of, you know, to deal with this preemptive Consecrate, must know there's a way for this Frothing Berserker to die. And obviously there's the weapon equipped, but we can see that there's Pyro Consecrate for next turn.
But let's take a moment to highlight how important and how heads up the play was from Kuonet on the previous turn to set this up with the first Consecration, because otherwise, Pyro Coin Consecration, he'd be losing his Pyromancer in the process, or he would have to tank extra damage by going into the Frothing.
Yep.
One of those two things would have to happen. Now, he can make the turn happen, preserve his weapon entirely, and preserve a 3-1 Frothing Berserker on the board, 3-1 Pyromancer on the board by coining first and then making the play happen. So that one preemptive Consecrate on the previous turn looked weird, it looked janky as all hell, but it's made this big swing turn possible.
Very, very sharp play. You know, like this is clean. You know, this is very, very clean play, and it, you know, looking at it from, you know, the spectator point of view, might look really obvious. Well, one, you've actually got loads of extra information your opponent doesn't, but also it is very easy to just say, oh well, yeah, I'm not going to buff this Frothing for it to hit me in the face next turn anyway, and then have to, you know, potentially swing into it again. So really heads up play there by Kuonet. Now Hoej is just going to play the Zoth first mate as a 1-1. A 1-mana 1-1, do nothing except be a pirate riding a bug.
Ooh. Kuonet.
Do tell, Sol.
I mean,
do tell.
Kuonet picking up the second taunt there, he probably feels like he's in really good shape
Wicker
right
Flame
now.
as well.
But yeah, Wicker Flame is actually a very, very big deal. He needed actually, over anything else, he needed a low-cost taunt that he could play that turn of any kind, right? Just so the Arcanite Reaper did not hit his face this turn. Now being able to play 2 taunts this turn means that he stays ahead of double Spellbreaker. This will not be Kuonet's thought process, by the way. He will not be planning how to beat 2 separate Spellbreakers
chain Spellbreakers.
Right now. It just so works out that that's exactly what he needs, and the Wicker Flame just ends up being a huge, huge deal for him in this position.
Because what you've got to look at as well is Kuonet had no good way to actually really deal with these Spellbreakers as minions.
Right.
Never mind the weapon. You know, he would take potentially 5 from the weapon, and then it's like, well, how do I kill the Spellbreaker? And then how do I kill the next one? Because he's always playing slightly behind. But as you said, the Wicker Flame changes everything.
And now, because he was able to play 2 taunts in the same turn there with the Stonehill into Wicker Flame, it means that unless something miraculous happens for Hoej, this Arcanite Reaper is going to have to connect with a taunt minion and not the place it really wants to connect, which is that bearded yellow gentleman at the bottom of your screen.
Tyrion. Hey! Got you! No, you meant Uther, of course. But still. My guess wasn't wrong.
Well, it was. It was a valid guess, but it was wrong.
Okay, I guess to all of your
criteria.
Criteria, yeah.
What now?
Which won the world title. I hope people can sense sarcasm across this broadcast, because everyone will be like, wow, we thought Raven wasn't really on point, but today, he's really not on point. It's like, why would you want the weapon to connect with Tyrion? I'm like, no, it was a joke. I promise.
There it is. Arcanite Reaper just connects with the 1-4. That is a big, big effective heal for Kuonet, and now the taunts are going to keep on coming. There's a good chance that this 4-6 just gets to hang around for an entire turn here, which means that instead of perhaps Tyrion Bordering having to come down, Rag Lightlord can come down instead, stabilize the game even quicker.
Yeah, I mean, to be pretty frank, Kuonet's just on the back of just on the verge, sorry, of just the victory here. Hoej has just another uphill climb, so close again, just not quite getting over the finishing line. And again, deckhand, not a great draw. He did get the Arcanite Reaper this game, but still, you know, I feel like every single game, although the Aldor Peacekeeper's still in hand from like turn 1, but like a Hydra would have made the biggest difference in these matchups for Hoej. Just any way to really push the damage. He's still never drawn Leroy, which is just casual 6 damage from hand. But now, I think this can be the turn where you rag. Because it's a win.
I'm just going to say,
it's a win-win.
That play from Hoej was abnormally good. He's found himself a win condition. He understood there that just spellbreakering the Curator and then connecting the existing spellbreaker to face lost 100% of the time to Primordial Drake that he knew was in hand because the Curator will have drawn it. So he's found himself a win condition now. I agree with you that the Rag Lightlord is potentially win-win, but now the Spellbreaker is still in hand to be able to remove this Taunt minion, so it's not as much of a win-win as it might look like it is to Kuonet.
No, but it is going to be a win-win now as Kuonet takes the series over Hoej 3-1 with his heavy control lineup, beating out Hoej's aggression, and the newcomer is really, really making his mark on the Spring Championships.
Yeah, what a story this is. I mean, my new favorite Hearthstone player, first and foremost, has been able to take down Dog first and foremost.